I was standing at my mother's grave when Margaret grabbed my wrist so hard it hurt. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear, and whispered 6 words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. "You deserve to know the truth." Then she pressed something into my palm, a small brass key, and walked away before I could even process what had happened. My mother had been dead for less than 2 hours, and already, the secrets were crawling out of the ground. My name is Catherine, and I'm 47 years old. For most of my life, I believed I knew exactly who I was. The only daughter of Rebecca Miller, a cold, distant woman who raised me with more duty than love. We never hugged. We barely spoke beyond necessities. When I was a child, I used to wonder if she even wanted me. As an adult, I stopped wondering and just accepted that some mothers simply don't have warmth to give. When she died last Tuesday from a sudden heart attack, I felt something I didn't expect. Not grief, exactly. More like unfinished business. A heavy door that had been locked my entire life, and now I'd never get the key. Except I did get a key. Literally. The funeral was small. My mother didn't have many friends, or at least none that showed up. There was Margaret, of course. Margaret Chen, her best friend since before I was born. There were a few neighbors, some distant cousins I'd never met, and my husband David, standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder, steady as always. The pastor said generic things about eternal rest and God's mercy. I didn't cry. I kept looking at Margaret, who stood across from me, her eyes red and swollen, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. After the service, people approached me with their condolences. Meaningless phrases. "She's in a better place. Time heals all wounds." I nodded and thanked them, playing my part. But Margaret didn't join the line. She waited until everyone else had left, until it was just me standing by the grave, watching the workers prepare to lower the casket. That's when she appeared beside me, silent as a ghost. "Catherine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, and that's when I saw it. Fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear in her eyes. "Margaret, are you all right?" She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced around, making sure we were alone. Then she grabbed my wrist, that painful grip, and leaned in. "You deserve to know the truth about who you really are." The words came out fast, urgent, like she was afraid she'd lose her courage if she didn't say them immediately. Then she pressed the key into my hand and closed my fingers around it. "Come to my house tomorrow. 3 o'clock. Come alone." Before I could respond, before I could ask what the hell she was talking about, she turned and hurried away, practically running to her car. I stood there, frozen, the key digging into my palm. David came up behind me. "What was that about?" he asked. I couldn't answer. I didn't know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning the key over in my hands, examining it under the lamp on my nightstand. It was old, tarnished brass, small enough to fit a diary or a jewelry box. There was no label, no marking to indicate what it opened. David snored softly beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. "Who you really are." What did that even mean? I knew who I was. Catherine Miller, married for 23 years, mother of 2 grown children, high school English teacher. What truth could possibly change that? But even as I thought it, I knew something was wrong. Because the truth was, I'd always felt like something was missing. Like there was a piece of my story that didn't quite fit. My mother never talked about my childhood. There were no baby photos in our house, no stories about my first words or first steps. When I asked as a kid, she'd get this look on her face. Tight. Closed. The past is the past, Catherine. No point dwelling on it. So I stopped asking. But the questions never really went away. They just got buried, like everything else in our family. The next day, I told David I was going to Margaret's to pick up some of my mother's belongings. It wasn't entirely a lie, I supposed. Whatever Margaret wanted to give me, it had belonged to my mother in some way. He kissed my forehead and told me to take my time, that grief was a process. I loved him for his sweetness, but I couldn't tell him what I was really feeling. Because it wasn't grief. It was dread. Margaret lived in the same house she'd lived in for 40 years, a modest 2-story colonial on the edge of town. I'd been there countless times as a child, playing in her backyard while she and my mother drank coffee in the kitchen and spoke in low voices that always stopped when I came near. I pulled into her driveway at exactly 3 o'clock. My hands were shaking. She opened the door before I could knock. "Come in," she said, her voice flat, exhausted. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. I followed her into the living room, where she'd laid out a collection of items on the coffee table. A shoebox, some yellowed papers, and a stack of old photographs. "Sit down, Catherine." I sat. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Margaret sat across from me, wringing her hands. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she spoke. "Your mother made me promise never to tell you. She made me swear on everything I held sacred. But now she's gone, and I can't. I can't take this to my grave too. You deserve to know." "Know what?" My voice came out harsher than I intended. Margaret reached for the shoebox and opened it. Inside were documents. Birth certificates. Adoption papers. My stomach dropped. "What is this?" "Rebecca wasn't your biological mother." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the couch. "What?" "She adopted you when you were 3 days old. The adoption was private, arranged through a family connection. It was kept secret. Completely off the books, as much as possible in those days." I couldn't breathe. Who is my real mother?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "That's the part Rebecca made me swear never to reveal. But I can't let you go through life not knowing where you came from." She pushed the papers toward me. Her name was Jennifer. Jennifer Williams. She was 16 years old when she had you. 16. A child herself. Where is she now? I don't know. After she gave you up, she disappeared. Rebecca told me the girl's family sent her away, that they wanted nothing to do with the baby or the scandal. This was 1978, Catherine. Things were different then. I picked up one of the photographs. It showed a young girl, dark-haired and pretty, holding a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby was me. The girl was a stranger. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would my mother keep this from me?" Margaret looked away. "Because Jennifer didn't want to give you up. She was forced." "And Rebecca?" "Rebecca was involved in that forcing." The air left the room. "What do you mean, involved?" "Rebecca was Jennifer's aunt. Your biological mother was Rebecca's niece. When Jennifer got pregnant, the family was horrified. They wanted it handled quietly. Rebecca offered to take the baby. To raise you as her own and keep the family's secret buried." I felt like I was falling through the floor. My mother, the woman who raised me with cold efficiency and zero affection, wasn't just my adoptive mother. She was my great-aunt. And she'd taken me from a terrified 16-year-old girl who didn't want to let me go. Did Rebecca force her? Margaret's silence was answer enough. I left Margaret's house in a daze. The shoebox was on the passenger seat, filled with fragments of a life I never knew existed. Birth certificates. Hospital records. A single photograph of Jennifer holding me, her eyes filled with a love so fierce it hurt to look at. I drove home on autopilot, my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. My name, my history, my family. All of it built on a secret so dark that my mother took it to her grave. Or tried to. David was waiting when I got home. "How did it go?" he asked, his face full of concern. I couldn't speak. I just handed him the photograph. He looked at it, confused at first, then his expression shifted as understanding dawned. "Catherine, what is this?" "That's my mother," I said. "My real mother. And I need to find her." The next week was a blur of research and dead ends. I started with the documents Margaret gave me. Jennifer Williams, born in 1962, last known address in a small town called Riverside, about 200 miles north. I found her birth certificate, her high school records, even a yearbook photo. She was beautiful. Dark eyes like mine, the same stubborn jaw. I looked at her picture and saw myself staring back. It was surreal. And painful. Because the more I learned, the more I realized how much had been stolen from both of us. I hired a private investigator. His name was Tom, a gruff man in his 60s who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. I gave him everything I had. Within 3 days, he called me. I found her. She's alive. Living in Oregon, small town called Clearwater. Married name is Jennifer Reeves. My heart stopped. Are you sure? Positive. I can give you her address and phone number if you want it. I did want it. I wanted it more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. But I was also terrified. What if she didn't want to see me? What if I opened this door and found only more pain on the other side? Tom gave me the information, and I sat with it for 2 days before I worked up the courage to make the call. When I finally dialed the number, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. It rang 3 times. Then a woman's voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi," I said, my voice cracking. "Is this Jennifer Reeves?" A pause. "Yes." "Who's calling?" "My name is Catherine Miller." I think you knew me a long time ago. When I was a baby." The silence that followed was so long I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard it. A sharp intake of breath. A sob. "Catherine?" Her voice broke on my name. Oh my God. "Catherine, is it really you?" I started crying. "Yes. It's me. I've been looking for you for 47 years. We talked for 3 hours that day. She told me everything. How she'd gotten pregnant at 15 by her high school boyfriend, how her family had been furious, how they'd sent her away to live with Rebecca during the pregnancy. How Rebecca had promised to help her keep the baby, to support her, but then after I was born, everything changed. Rebecca convinced the family that Jennifer was too young, too unstable, that the baby deserved better. They pressured her, manipulated her, and finally, they took me while Jennifer was still recovering from childbirth. She never even got to say goodbye. "I tried to get you back," she said, her voice raw with old pain. "I went to Rebecca's house, begged her. But she told me if I made trouble, she'd make sure I never saw you again. She had connections, money. I was 16 with nothing. So I left. But I never stopped thinking about you. Not for a single day." "Why didn't you try to find me when I was older?" I asked. "I did. When I turned 18, I hired a lawyer. But the adoption records were sealed. Rebecca made sure of that. Every time I got close, doors closed in my face. I eventually gave up, convinced myself you were better off without me. But I never stopped hoping that one day you'd come looking for me." We agreed to meet. She lived too far for a quick visit, so we planned a weekend. David came with me for support. The drive to Oregon felt like it took forever. I was nervous, excited, terrified. What do you say to a mother you've never known? How do you make up for 47 years of absence? When we pulled up to her house, a small cottage with a garden full of roses, she was waiting on the porch. I got out of the car, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she started walking toward me, and I started walking toward her, and suddenly we were running. We met in the middle of her driveway, and she threw her arms around me and held on like she'd never let go. "My baby," she kept saying. "My baby. You're here." You're really here. I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. Because I realized something in that moment. This was what love felt like. The fierce, unconditional, all-consuming love I'd spent my whole life missing. Rebecca had given me a roof over my head and food on the table, but she'd never given me this. This feeling of being wanted, of being cherished, of being home. We spent the weekend talking. Jennifer told me about her life, her marriage to a kind man named Robert, their 2 children, my half-siblings. She showed me photo albums of them growing up, and I saw pieces of myself in their faces. She told me she'd named me Emily, before Rebecca changed it to Catherine. Emily Grace, she said. After my grandmother. I wanted you to have a name that meant something, that connected you to family. I told her about my life, my children, my career. She cried when she saw pictures of my kids, her grandchildren she'd never known. They have your eyes, she said. And your smile. God, Catherine, you've built such a beautiful life. I'm so proud of you. On the last day of the visit, we sat in her garden, drinking tea and watching the sunset. Do you hate her? Jennifer asked quietly. Rebecca, I mean. For what she did. I thought about it. Did I hate her? Part of me did. Part of me was furious at the woman who'd stolen my mother from me, who'd raised me with cold distance instead of warm love. But another part of me understood, in a sad, complicated way. I think she did what she thought was right, I said. In her mind, she was saving me from a life of hardship. She gave me stability, education, opportunities. She just didn't give me love. Maybe she didn't know how. Jennifer reached over and took my hand. You're more forgiving than I am. I'm not forgiving her, I said. I'm just trying to understand. And I'm trying to let go of the anger, because holding on to it won't change the past. But I'll never forgive her for keeping us apart. That was cruel. And unnecessary. Jennifer squeezed my hand. We can't get back the years we lost. But we have now. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your life going forward. I'd like that too, I said. And I meant it. The drive home was quiet. David held my hand while I stared out the window, processing everything. How are you feeling? He asked. Honestly? I don't know. It's like my whole life has been rewritten. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, it's all different now. But also, I feel lighter. Like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying has been lifted. That's good, he said. You deserve to feel light. When we got home, I went straight to my study and pulled out the key Margaret had given me. I'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of finding Jennifer. But now I was curious. What did it open? I searched my mother's belongings, the boxes I'd brought home from her house after the funeral. Finally, in the back of her closet, I found it. A small wooden box, locked, with a keyhole that matched the key perfectly. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to me, all written in my mother's precise handwriting. I picked up the first one, dated 3 days after my birth. Dear Catherine, it began. Today I brought you home. You are the most beautiful baby I've ever seen, and I promise to give you the best life I can. I know your mother loved you. I know she didn't want to let you go. But I will love you too, in my own way. Even if I'm not good at showing it. I read through the letters, one by one. Years of thoughts and feelings my mother had never been able to express out loud. Regrets about her coldness, fears about whether she'd done the right thing, hopes for my future. The last letter was dated just a week before she died. Catherine, it said. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Margaret has finally told you the truth. I know you must be angry. I know you probably hate me. I don't blame you. What I did was wrong. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for everyone, but the truth is, I was selfish. I wanted a child, and I took one, even though it meant destroying Jennifer's life and yours. I've lived with that guilt every day. I couldn't love you the way you deserved because every time I looked at you, I saw my sin reflected back at me. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm sorry for everything I took from you. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. But I understand if you can't. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by letters, and cried. Not for the mother I'd lost, but for the mother I'd never really had. For the relationship we could have had if she'd just been honest, if she'd just let herself love me without guilt poisoning everything. She'd been a coward, keeping her secrets locked away instead of facing them. And in doing so, she'd robbed both of us of something precious. But she'd also given me the key, in the end. Maybe that was her way of making amends. Letting Margaret tell me the truth, leaving me these letters. It wasn't enough. It didn't erase the pain. But it was something. I called Jennifer that night. I found letters, I told her. From Rebecca. She was sorry. For what it's worth. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm glad she felt sorry. But sorry doesn't give us back the years we lost. No, I agreed. It doesn't. But we have the future. And I choose to focus on that. Me too, she said. And that's where I am now. 3 months after my mother's funeral, I'm learning to build a relationship with the mother I should have had all along. It's not easy. There's awkwardness, gaps in our knowledge of each other, years of missed moments we can never reclaim. But there's also joy. So much joy. Jennifer came to visit last month, and we spent a week together, cooking meals, taking walks, just being mother and daughter. My kids met their grandmother for the first time. She cried when she held them. People ask me if I regret finding out the truth. If I wish Margaret had just kept the secret buried with Rebecca. And I tell them no. Because yes, the truth hurt. It shattered my understanding of my life and forced me to confront painful realities. But it also freed me. Freed me from the constant feeling that something was wrong, that I was missing a piece of myself. Now I know who I am. Where I came from. And why my mother was the way she was. I'm not saying I've forgiven Rebecca. I'm not sure I ever will. But I understand her a little better now. She was a flawed woman who made a terrible choice and then spent the rest of her life paying for it in her own way. She couldn't love me because she couldn't forgive herself. And that's sad. Sad for her, and sad for me. But I refuse to let her mistakes define the rest of my life. I have Jennifer now. I have my children, my husband, my life. And I have the truth. Finally, after 47 years, I have the truth. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Secrets destroy families. They poison relationships, create distance where there should be love, and rob people of their own histories. If you're keeping a secret, especially one that affects someone else's life, please consider telling the truth. Yes, it will be hard. Yes, it might hurt. But in the long run, truth is always better than lies. And if you're someone who's been lied to, someone who's discovered that your whole life was built on a secret, know this. You are not alone. Your anger is valid. Your pain is real. But there is life on the other side of the truth. There is healing and connection, and the possibility of building something new from the ruins of what was broken. I found my mother at 47 years old. And even though we can't get back the time we lost, every moment we have now is a gift. A gift that Rebecca's secret almost stole from us forever. But secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of coming to light. And when they do, you have a choice. You can let them destroy you, or you can use them to rebuild something stronger, something true. I chose truth. And I've never looked back. If you've ever felt like something was missing from your life, like there's a piece of your story you don't know, write in the comments below. You're not alone in that feeling. And who knows, maybe your truth is out there waiting to be discovered too. Subscribe to hear more stories like mine, stories about the secrets families keep and the courage it takes to uncover them. Because everyone deserves to know where they came from. Everyone deserves to know the truth.